Hello guys, Robert here from loamwolf.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm here in the high alpine above Aosta in Italy, where Scott is releasing their brand new Genius trail bike. This borrows the internal shock technology from the Spark and the Bold bikes of previous, giving the bike a real clean, unique look and some performance benefits that we'll get onto in a bit. We're going to be taking this thing down some of the awesome high alpine trails up in the Alps, seeing how it gets on, riding along with some pros, Brendan Fairclough and many others, so you're not going to want to miss this one. Join us along for a first ride on Scott Genius. So the most obvious update, both visually and in terms of how the bike actually performs, is the internal suspension technology that Scott has opted to use for their new Genius. You can find it on their Spark cross-country bike as well, and potentially other models in the future, you would imagine, but certainly for now, the Genius is the one that we're going to talk about. And what this integrated shock technology allows the bike to do is not only protect the shock from the elements as you'd expect, but there's also some performance benefits in terms of the rigidity around the shock mount, as well as the lower center of gravity that it provides, which all should add up to a slightly better performing bike out on the trails. Certainly you'll be able to see us taking it out, and the performance has not been lacking so far. This is only a first ride video though, so you'll have to stay tuned for the long-term review coming to the site in the coming months. So for the Genius, we're not going to gloss over the details. If you want to find out more, check out the press release and the first ride review written article on the site.
To quickly touch on the geometry of the Scott Genius, the head tube angle comes in at 63.9 degrees in the slack setting, which can be steepened up to 65.1 degrees by flipping the headset cups around. The seat tube angle sits at 77.2 degrees in the size large and steepens slightly as you go through the size range to maintain the weight distribution on the bike when seated. The reach is 485mm and there's a 644mm stack. The chainstay comes in at 440mm long and the BB drop is 33mm. So the overall wheelbase on the size large is 1263mm.
So for the new Genius, Scott is offering their 3 different frame material options. You've got the full HMX carbon super lightweight frame, then a hybrid with a carbon front triangle with a slightly lower grade mixed with a aluminium rear end. And then there's a full alloy version, which we'll be doing a little kind of tech check video on. If you check out the YouTube, it's probably going to be a couple of weeks before that one's released. But you won't want to miss it if you want to learn a little bit more about what goes into the production of an aluminium bike. And within those 3 different frame materials, there's also multiple different spec levels to cater to your budget and the level of bling that you want to go for. Interestingly, Scott is also offering what they call the ST level builds, and these stand for Super Trail. So Scott offers a little bit less sort of climbing performance in favor of more tunability for the descents. So these are the slightly more aggressive downhill oriented bikes that the kind of more enduro, like towards enduro level riders would want to ride, whereas the standard Genius is designed just to be a trail all mountain bike with slightly more focus on the climbing performance. For that climbing performance, Scott continues to use a remote lockout system. They're calling it still twin lock for the standard Genius, but the ST that I've been testing uses a new Tracloc system. This only controls the rear shock, and we're actually going to just cut over to the Fox suspension engineer, who's going to give us a little run through about what that does. So as I mentioned, this Scott Genius has a remote control lockout kind of system that I briefly touched on, but who better to introduce it and explain about what it does than Sam Schaefer from Fox. He's going to give us a quick run through of how it works so we can learn a little bit more.
Hey guys, so this new Scott Genius has the Float X Nude Shock. It is based on Fox's current Float X, and the difference here is that it is a 3-position shock. And what that means is that it has a damper adjustment as well as an air spring adjustment. And those 2 adjustments are timed together to create 3 distinct modes. And so in your descend mode, you have full air spring volume and a fully open compression circuit. In the middle mode, you have a closed off air spring volume, so it's like adding a lot of volume spacers, but your damper is still open. And then in the climb mode, the damper is closed and the air spring is also in that reduced volume state. And the ramp control mode is a new thing for Scott and for Fox. And the cool thing about that is that it's great for technical climbing or descending where you need more support. It really keeps the rear wheel stuck to the ground when you're climbing over roots and rocks, as well as providing additional support on a smoother descending trail. And we're really excited about how this bike has turned out, how the shock works, and I'm sure everyone who tries it will love it.
So before we drop in here, I figured I'd take the opportunity while we've got a minute to take a peek inside and show you what's going on inside the frame. So we've got this cover on the down tube, access with a little button, pops it off and reveals all the suspension inside, giving you access to low speed compression, to the rebound, to the air pressure, and also you can just about make out there the system with the lockout that you can actuate from the bar. So certainly it's not terrible as some open bikes, you might say, that make it harder for you to get to the settings. And then once you've done your adjustment, you just plop it back on, it pops back into place and hopefully stays in place there when you go down the hill. Pretty interesting. I think it's quite a unique approach to how the bike performs and how it tailors it to the terrain. And certainly from the first rides that we've been having on the bike, it's an effective system. It makes a difference, but it's not quite as extreme as you might expect. Even in the fully locked out mode, which is not a full lockout, the bike is still relatively compliant, and you don't totally lose the traction. It just firms it up to the point that when you are kind of sprinting, especially on smoother fire roads, there is quite a bit less wallow. Not to say that the bike doesn't pedal well when things are fully open, but certainly it does make a difference for that. So we're well on the way up towards this promised coffee, which I'm assuming is going to taste all the sweeter. About 160 meters of climbing so far. Nothing too crazy or strenuous. And certainly with a beautiful view. I figured I'd talk about the twin lock system that Scott continues to use on the Genius. It's because we've got the Super Trail version here, the slightly more aggressive package. The twin lock is only actually a single lock, technically, only working on the rear shock, and the fork remains fully open, with all the adjustments from the grip to the damper still accessible. So much the same as the Canyon Strive CFR that I recently tested. On the bar you've got a single lever that houses the dropper post up and down, and then the lock for the suspension on the back with the traction mode, which is the middle setting, and then the full lockout climb mode, which is the further away setting. And then these release with the secondary lever here, like the Canyon system, super easy to find. And yeah, so far we've not done anything that's really tested the system on the smooth fire roads. Actually, even when the Genius is fully open, it's still pedaling pretty well, or very well in fact. So it'll be interesting to get on some more technical climbing later on and see how it performs for that, and see if it makes a difference and makes it worthwhile. How that Tracloc performed. We got it set to the middle position. Now with the lockout. more of a difference. Yeah. So, the Scott Genius Super Trail, how does it ride? Well, over the last couple of days in the Aosta Valley, we've been putting plenty of vert into this bike, but it has only been 2 quick rides. There's not been a huge amount of time to play about with the settings, so I definitely think that this thing can become more capable than it has felt so far. That's not to say it's not been capable though. We've been charging down some trails, totally blind, dust everywhere, you can barely see what's happening, and it's been a whole lot of fun. There's enough stability from the geometry and also quite a planted suspension feel that it's felt nice and confident and reassuring to be pushing and trying to keep up with Brendan and Andrew Needlin. It's certainly no mean feat. They are absolute rippers. So I'm quite stoked to have kept them in my sights for the most part here in Aosta, and I think this machine is partly to thank for that. Talking about the Tracloc quickly, it was something that I was keen to play about with a lot, and on the first day of testing, where we were just purely descending after a pretty good long climb up, I didn't really find the value in it. When it was locked out, sure, you definitely firm up the platform, but we were on smooth fire road, and honestly, when you're seated on this bike, the suspension's moving so little that you're not really losing any energy. It doesn't feel like you're kind of wasting your energy when you're pedaling, thanks to the relatively firm platform. So I was sort of questioning the need for it on this bike. However, on the second day of riding, we were on some more undulating terrain, and that's where I started to find the value in the system. Certainly for the kind of quick, punchy climbs, just being able to chuck it into that lockout mode was very helpful, especially when they're a bit smoother. And then having the ability to change the progression and give yourself a slightly firmer platform with a flick of a switch for the more mellow descents was very much appreciated too. So certainly I think it's something that does add a little bit of performance to the bike overall. Whether or not you need it, I'm not so sure, because I think the standard kinematics in the open mode are pretty damn good. But then the bike wasn't too loud, there wasn't too much cable mess. I don't think it detracts too much from the bike either. It doesn't add a huge amount of weight, and the shock certainly performed super nicely. So I don't think it takes away anything from the bike performance either. And it's definitely not something that I'd be looking to remove immediately when I kind of purchase the bike. Otherwise, honestly, I think after the first couple of days, you're going to struggle to really, there's been so much going on, so many kind of blind laps following down dusty terrain that all that I can say is this thing is pretty nice and capable, but you're going to want to stay tuned for the long-term review in the coming months, where we're going to be putting this thing really through its paces, trying to get the setup nailed and seeing how the components perform in the long term. So stay tuned for that. And I hope for now you guys have enjoyed checking out this video on the brand new Scott Genius. Head to the site to read the full write-up of our first ride and check out some more details of the bike. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Give us a like if you've enjoyed the video. Comment, let us know your thoughts on this bike. Do you like how it looks with that internal shock technology? I certainly think it is pretty nice and unique and super clean. And subscribe to the channel to see more awesome videos on awesome bikes like this. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I hope to catch you out on the trails.